Here with a very special guest by the name of Lloyd Pye. Lloyd Pye, you might have heard about. He wrote a book called Everything You Know Is Wrong, which in itself is a whole other story and a whole other interview, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. Although he can tell us a little bit about that book as well, because it leads us to our subject. Our subject is the star child skull. And yes, that sounds very intriguing. It's believed to be possibly a hybrid between human and ET species. And we're here to talk to Lloyd Pye. Welcome, Lloyd.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your background and Everything You Know Is Wrong? That relates to what?
Well, that relates to the research that I'd done for most of my career, which was into human origins, and I was looking for an answer to some of the mysteries that are within the accepted parameters of human origins: Darwinism, creationism, intelligent design. I didn't buy really any of those, and I thought that there was an alternative view that wasn't being addressed. So I began to point myself in that direction as a young man, and I followed through, and finally, about 7, 8 years ago, I was able to publish a book about my own thoughts on the matter, and it's done well in the field of alternative knowledge. Everything You Know Is Wrong, and it's about my interpretation of the what's called the interventionist point of view, or the interventionist theory of human origins, which is that humans are a created species. I know how that sounds to the average person just to say that outright, that we were created not in a godlike way, but in a genetic way, that we were put together by gene manipulation by beings that are superior to us, but that are flesh and blood beings from just other worlds that are out there. So I try to take as pragmatic approach as I can to the genetic facts that I'm aware of, and facts which are just simply, for the most part, either ignored, denied, or just in other ways suppressed from general knowledge, but which are in fact facts and are there and can be verified.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so very interesting to me, and that does bring us to our subject of the star child skull. Right. Now, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to be in possession of this very unusual?
Well, the people that owned it was found in about 1930 by a woman who was of Mexican heritage, and she found it in a mine tunnel along with another 2 complete skeletons, and she recovered the 2 skulls, a human skull, clearly a human skull, and this misshapen skull. That's all she called it at the time, misshapen skull. So she kept it her whole life and died in the early 90s, and as she was getting ready to die, she willed it to another couple. They kept the 2 skulls in a cardboard box in their garage for about 5 years, and they didn't particularly like it either. The wife didn't anyway, so she asked her husband to get rid of them, find another home for them. So they did, with a young couple that were UFO knowledgeable. They were knowledgeable about UFO matters, and they looked at that skull and they said, "Gee, that could go in the head of a gray, couldn't it?" And so they agreed that it could. And so they began a search for somebody to get it scientifically tested, and that they asked around in the community about who might be a researcher that would have enough knowledge about skulls to have some advantages to getting this done, and my name came up, and they invited me to come take a look at it, and I did, and I thought it was really special. I did. I thought it was probably a human deformity, but I felt that it needed to be absolutely determined that was the case, because if it wasn't, obviously it would be something, a hybrid. It would be something very special. It would be an alien-human hybrid, probably. Right. So based on that possibility, which initially seemed remote, I took on the job thinking that it would be maybe 6 months of effort, and soon it will be, in February of 2005, it will be 6 years. So I was quite mistaken in my value judgment of how long it was going to take and what kind of effort it was going to take to get this thing tested and find out what it is.
Well, certainly, I want to go back to a point you made, that we have to determine, or you have to determine, that this is not a skull that is, say, from a hydrocephalic baby or something like that, it is not a human skull, it's something other than human. And so I know that, as you say, tests have been done for the last several years. It's been quite the process for you. And they're ongoing. And the answers will become, hopefully, revealed in the near future. Can you tell us, looking at the skull itself, how is it different from a human skull?
Well, Catherine, it's different in just about every way, literally, that you can imagine. If you look at it here up close, you can see that the eye sockets are extremely shallow relative to normal human eye sockets. If I were to stick, as the audience can see, if I were to stick my finger into a normal human eye socket, it would go up to my second knuckle. It would be in a full 2 inches. We have very deep, very large eye sockets, normal humans do. As you can see, as I put it in the Star Child skull, it goes up to the first joint, so it goes half or less than half as much into. So these are very, very shallow. They're also reduced in size. The brow ridges, it has no brow ridges. It has no dip in the nose. It has no frontal sinuses in there at all. It has a very small cheekbone area, very, very small lower face, like a child or less, and yet the skull itself seems to be of a mature individual. The inner ears, for reasons we don't understand, are larger than our inner ears. The rear of the head, which is extremely different, it's flattened, but not artificially flattened. It's a head that's been cradle boarded or in any way shaped takes the form and the surface of the shaping device, whatever that is. If it's a board, if this had been tied to a board, then the back of its head would be as flat as the board, because baby bone is very soft and malleable, and so it will flatten out, absolutely. So this, as you see, you yourself can see it. You can just rub your hand across it and feel the
there
contours.
Are ridges and...
Well, just contours, not even ridges, but, ridges imply something sharp. They're smooth, but there are definitely contours. The natural contours of the bone are there. So this tells us that it was never cradle boarded. This was never shaped artificially. This is the way this thing was born, and it was born this way because probably, in all likelihood, its genes told it to shape itself this way, because it's very symmetrical as you look at it from the top, as you look at it from the sides, as you look at it from the bottom. Everything about it is balanced, well balanced too. It's very symmetrical. One of the hallmarks of deformity, of human skull or human body deformity, really, is asymmetry. It's ugly. It's not balanced. It doesn't look good. There's nothing really asymmetrical about this. It's symmetrical in every dimension, in every plane. It's put together very well with good balance, so it doesn't imply that there's any real true deformity here at all. This is pretty much the way it grew. Now, getting back to the rear, what you have back here with the front of the face, we've already talked about how small all the parts of it are. In normal human chewing muscles, where our lower jaw muscles come up through our zygomatic arches, through our cheekbone muscles, to fan out and attach to the side of our heads, you can see, when I do, it goes up much higher than you would think. It goes way up to the top up here, attaches to your head. The Star Child attaches in this darkened area right here. You can see that line of almost of attachment, but a little less. So the muscles are very, very small, less than half.
What would that indicate?
Well, it indicates
the
that the lower jaw and the lower face is going to be very, very small, very narrow, very small, relative to ours.
Not much capacity to chew?
Well, we don't know, but probably not much relative to what we have, given the size of the chewing muscles versus its chewing muscles relative to ours. Wouldn't be able to generate a whole lot of torque, you would think. Bones would be small, not able to create much force, exactly. Now, with the neck, we have with sort of the same situation. In the back of a normal human head, it's rounded off, obviously, And at a certain point about halfway down, you have a knot at the back of your head, which is called the inion. I have it, you have it, everybody has it. We can all feel that. That's where our neck attaches. That's where our neck begins, right on that knot. So if you cradle board or do any kind of deformity, it can't go past that spot, that knot at the back of your head, because the board can't dig into your neck muscles and tear them away from their attachment points. It just doesn't work. So all flattening stops at the inion in a normal skull. And as you can see with this one, not only do you not have a bump, if you feel it with your finger, what do you feel? No, right here, that spot.
There's a depression right there.
A small depression.
Is that where the neck bones would attach?
That's
on
where
the skull?
that's where the knot should be. That's where the
neck.
inion should be. The external occipital protuberance, it's called. And not only do you not have it, you have a little dent here. So something's very different. So the neck, instead of attaching up here on the star child where it would normally attach, at this point, the attachment points are right here, which is like almost to the neck itself. So you have a neck area that just covers through here. So basically, the neck of this being, whatever it was, is about half the size of of a normal size neck. Furthermore, instead of the head being balanced back here the way it is with a normal human, the balance point is up here, very much further forward, where the foramen magnum, or where the spine goes in, is centered up so that you get lateral and medial flexion. That it's right at the balance point of all of that. So instead of the skull sitting on a neck that's slanted and canted back of center, ours is, because the front of our face is relatively hollow. And so our brains, in order for it to balance, the fulcrum point has to be moved to the rear of the skull in order for it all to work. With this, it sits on top of what basically amounts to a thin, small neck, dead center over the top of it. It's like a weird-shaped golf ball sitting on top of a golf tee, rather than the kind of neck situation we have. Now, these are all changes that are, any one of which is profound relative to a normal human being. If your neck wasn't right, if your head was, the back of your head wasn't right, if you didn't have sinuses, if you didn't have normal eyes. I mean, this thing's eyes, as you can see from being pushed down like this, and the foramens being the foramen openings for the optic nerve and the vessels that feed the eye, are so far down that if it has eyes, they're sitting down here in the middle of the face, rather than up where they belong.
As you mentioned before, the face itself is much lower on the skull than a normal human.
It's much smaller, right? It's much smaller, but the eyes would be down here. So in every way, you have all these very profound morphological changes, the changes in shape, changes in position, that's the changes in the morphology of the skull. In every dimension and in every way that you can think of, it's different. This is different, but nonetheless, the parts are the same. You have a frontal bone, you have two sphenoids, you have two temporals, you have two parietals, and you have an occipital. You have the parts, but the parts themselves have been reconfigured into these new shapes, and the bone itself has been reconstituted into bone that is half the thickness of normal human bone, actually a little less than half, and a little less than half the weight. So you have half the thickness, half the weight, and a completely different shape. You have to start beginning at that point to ask yourself, are we really looking at a total and complete human being here, even a deformed or misshapen one? It doesn't seem to hold to the rules of deformity, which are that if you are deformed, you are asymmetrical, you are ugly, something's wrong, you don't look right. Everybody knows when they see somebody that's not right, not normal. And with this, though it's different in every conceivable way, if there were skin on it, and excuse me, and it looked, looked like you or I, it would look completely different than we do, I'm sure, no doubt about that. But it wouldn't look ugly. It would look just different. It wouldn't be lopsided. It wouldn't be. We wouldn't look at it and say, "Oh God, that's terrible." Yeah, it just wouldn't be that way. So
has there been a model made of the idea of what this?
We've had some
like?
forensic drawings. Yes, we've had 5 forensic drawings. We have the the best of the 5, I think, on the website at the Star Child Project website, www.starchildproject.com, so if people want to go see what that drawing looks like. We have not done a clay model yet, simply because we just don't have the money. For us, money is a constant battle to get the money to do the things that we need to do, and those kinds of things, though they would be wonderfully nice to have, are not really primary things that we need. We need testing more than we need that.
Put the money towards research
but that doesn't
and
mean that doesn't mean that we won't get that kind of model done as soon as we have the money, because I think we all would like to see a face on it. But we're talking, we're talking a few $1,000s at minimum, and we just don't have generally a few $1,000s to spare in the effort that we're putting out to get this thing tested chemically and other ways to see what it is.
Right. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, about what the viewing audience can do to help out in this project. Give them some contact information. Okay, you mentioned in your lecture that there are actually, there's a higher degree of collagen in this bone as well compared to human. It's very, very strong. And when you did the testing for it here at UC Davis, there was a remark made by the researchers that it smelled like tooth, tooth being drilled.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It was when it was cut, there was a very strong odor in the room of burning. It's like when you go to the dentist.
Right.
But it was much, much stronger. And they commented that while bone will give you that odor because it's being burned with as it's being cut, it's being burned, but it wasn't that strong. This was a stronger dose of it than they were used to smelling. And we found out later that because it's and this was news to all of us as we've learned it, when a dentist drills your teeth and you get that smell, you think it's your enamel, but in fact it's the collagen inside the matrix of the bone of your teeth that make that smell. It isn't the enamel, it's the collagen. And because the Star Child, we just recently found out, has an abundance or an overabundance of collagen, that's probably explains why that smell was as strong as it was when we cut it.
You also made another comment during your lecture that the researchers indicated that there actually was a connection because the skull, the bone itself, is very dense and layered. It is similar to tooth enamel in that way.
Well, it seems, this is in some of the recent testing that we've been doing in the biochemistry of it, of the bone, we've found that there's a layering effect that is not really present to that extent in normal human bone. And within those layers, normally when you do an analysis of the material of the bone itself, there are two parts. There's calcium hydroxyapatite, or just apatite bone, that's bone, and then there's collagen. So there's a mixture of collagen bone, collagen bone, collagen bone. And it's sort of like, most bone is like cement poured in a mold. It just sort of fills in and just kind of goes where it wants to go and hardens at its own pace, and they're kind of swirls, and it isn't really layered. And you could see that, in fact, in many of the slides. You could see that there wasn't a real layering effect. But in the Star Child bone, toward the bottom of the inside of the bone, the bottom part of it, there is indeed a layering effect. And more than that, you have readings from the scanning electron microscope that indicate that you have calcium hydroxyapatite, apatite bone, you have collagen, and you have something that looks, that its chemical signature is a lot like enamel. So it's possible that that banding has some enamel in it to make the bone harder to cut than normal, and that's one of the things about the reconstitution of it. Not only is it half as thick and half as dense or half as heavy, it also is harder to cut. It has more durability. It's stronger than it should be.
And you made the comment that, or you indicated in the research that it was, let's see, what I wrote down here, I wrote my notes. When they did the testing on this skull, they put a piece of it in something called EDTA, and normally a very short time, with human bone, it would break it down a week, but it was sitting in this substance for 10 weeks and had no effect on this particular sample of bone from this skull until it was put into detergent, and then it was pretty well disintegrated. So in that regard as well, it obviously reacted very differently than normal human.
Right. It has absolutely not responded to the breakdown chemically of the geneticist the way it should have. I mean, there's something fundamentally and possibly even profoundly different about it, but certainly fundamentally different. We're trying to establish what it is and that is significant and what it is that is absolutely definable as different.
Yes.
And, what is just variations on possibilities within normalcy.
Right. And I'm sure that's one reason it's taking so long to do all the testing, because you want to be absolutely sure.
Well, we do. We have to be sure of everything that we do, that it holds up to scientific scrutiny, because with something, the old thing about extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But by the same token, extraordinary evidence requires extraordinary attention by those who are in charge of taking a look at things that are extraordinary. Yes. And this certainly qualifies. And it's hard to get people to, scientists particularly who should be looking at it, it's hard to get them to take it seriously, because they've been so inculcated with the belief that something like what this might be, a human alien hybrid, or even a full alien, although we don't think that. We think it's a hybrid. Their belief system insists that such a thing is impossible, and so for them to be good practitioners of the scientific faith, they have to believe what they're told to believe about this, which is that this is impossible. And so we're sort of at loggerheads with many scientists over the fact that we make the claim that this could be. One of the possibilities for this is that it is a human alien hybrid.
Fascinating. Okay, you've gone over some of the physical differences with the shallow eye sockets. You say there's no sinuses up there in the forehead, like we normally have spaces behind the forehead. The nose is it similar? The
bridge width, the area between the eye sockets is about the same as a human for that size, right?
Okay. You also do have a little piece of the jawbone from the skull, is that right?
No,
it's
we
being
have
tested.
Upper piece of maxilla, right? It's still
the maxilla,
still
not the
in
mandible.
London, right? With no mandible, just upper right piece of maxilla.
I took biology anatomy and physiology a long time ago, so some of these terms are familiar to me, but may not be to our viewing audience. What about any evidence of ear canal?
Yeah, if you look at here, this is the ear hole right here.
Okay.
And you can see where a small ear would wrap around. This would be the mastoid back here behind.
Okay.
And this would be the cheekbone starting right here. And the inner ear is larger than our inner ears for reasons we don't really fully understand. We also should mention, I think, that the brain capacity of this thing is significantly larger than a normal human this size. It's a little smaller, as you can see. It's smaller than ours, and this is its exact size. So the
this
skull.
Is a model, by the way.
Right. This is not the original. This is a model. But it's an exact replica. Exact replica, stereolithographic copy. So the brain that you and I would have in our heads would be about 1,400 cubic centimeters. That's average. For a human being this size, which would be small, maybe a 12-year-old child or a 5-foot-tall adult, that would be about a 1,200 cubic centimeter brain, in that range. What is in here, though, in this same space, is 1,600 cubic centimeters. What should be holding 1,200 cubic centimeters of human brain is, in fact, holding 1,600 cubic centimeters of whatever's in there.
25% larger space for a brain.
No, actually 33.5.
Okay.
It's one-third, fully one-third larger.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's large, relatively speaking, to what it should be. So we have to ask ourselves, how would it get that much more brain crammed into the same space? Well, you think about it. You take away the sinus areas, the sinus cavities. You take away the great depth of the eye sockets. You expand out here in the parietals. This is called bossing, or the bossing in the parietals, all adding to an increase in brain power. This thing is wall-to-wall brain. This is a big brain.
Wow.
So it's
probably
for a reason.
Fascinating. Now, I wanted to get to the other real important differences. In the lecture, you described in a cutaway of the bone, the skull, there were these, what did you call them? Cannulus bone?
Cancellous holes.
Cancellous holes.
Right.
Okay.
You have the any sheet of bone that like fits around, in the skull, what wraps around the head here, skull bone. You have the upper surface and the lower surface, and they're solid. They're called cortical surfaces, and they're solid.
Mm-hmm.
Inside, between the cortical surfaces, like a sandwich, is what are called the cancellous holes, and they're holes working their way through the bone, and that's where bone marrow moves when you're alive. It moves through, and that's how it's replenished and things are repaired, and things like that. So you have your cancellous holes are where how the bone marrow moves, and you have cancellous holes in your arm bones and
right.
all your bones.
Right.
That's how they nourish themselves, is through the cancellous holes. It's like Swiss cheese, basically, the holes in Swiss cheese. So with a human, when anybody dies, we all carry within us bacteria that are going to reduce us over time to nothing. Mm-hmm. This is the way of life, of all life.
And
ashes
this skull
to ashes.
has been determined to be 900 years old, plus or minus 40 years.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So it's 900 years old, and yet somehow or other, it has left some residue behind in its cancellous holes, which has absolutely no business being there. We don't know what it is, but as you saw in the slides, it's a reddish kind of almost granular residue. Mm-hmm. So we don't know if it's desiccated marrow or some other kind of chemical, biochemical, inorganic, organic. We don't know what it is. We need to determine what it is. But we're excited by the possibility that it could be marrow, desiccated marrow, because if it is, then it means one of two things. A DNA test should be able to determine what that is. And we have already done a very thorough and extensive DNA testing procedure in Davis, and those gentlemen could not find any nuclear DNA. They found mitochondrial DNA, which comes from your mother, but they didn't find any nuclear DNA, which comes from both your mother and your father. Mm-hmm. So it leads us to believe that if there was desiccated marrow, they should very easily have been able to find some nuclear DNA in that. And the fact that they didn't makes us wonder, well, is it possible that they're not actually seeking out human DNA here, or entirely human DNA, and that's why they would have missed it, because the primers that they use are designed strictly for human DNA, for nothing else.
Right.
So
anything outside that box wouldn't have made itself known, because that's not what they were looking for.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly that.
Interesting. But it's fascinating, first of all, that the substance is there, and it could be marrow. The skull's over 900 years old. Why is that still there? But it'll be interesting to know, even if it's not marrow, what it is. And exactly. I don't know, I kept thinking iron oxide, but I'm not a scientist.
No, you're right. If it was a mineral, ferrous, anything ferrous in nature would be the obvious choice because of the color. However,
yes.
ferrous sulfite, ferrous sulfide, ferrous, any of the ferrous compounds have a darker, maroonish, they're not like a bright red. You saw that color.
Yeah,
it
was
bright
definitely red. And as you pointed out, dried blood is blackish.
Yeah, exactly.
In color.
So we don't really know what we're looking at. I mean, and that's part of the great puzzle of this, is it produces so many mysteries.
Yes.
And it seems like every test we have done produces more mysteries. And instead of fully answering things and allowing us to say, okay, well, we're finished here, it just means, well, now we have to do this to determine what this is. So it's a domino effect, that once you flick that first one, there are a lot of dominoes out there that you don't know until you get there.
But how fascinating. You pointed out that there are still many more tests to be done, one of them being the soil samples in Mexico where this skull was found. You mentioned a little bit about the skull was found by a Mexican girl, and this was in the 30s. And the skull was found actually with a skeleton and next to another skeleton. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the way it was found was in a mine tunnel in a little Mexican village about 100 miles southwest of Chihuahua. And this 15-year-old girl went in the mine tunnel and she saw the human skeleton lying on its back. And as she went closer, she noticed that there was a hand, what she called a misshapen hand, protruding out of the soil and wrapped around the upper arm bone of the human lying on the dirt. Mm-hmm. So she dug both skeletons out and recovered the two skulls. Now, what you have to make the assumption is that what happened is that the small one, this one, died and was buried. And as she buried it, as the human buried it, she left the hand sticking up so that it could wrap around her arm, mm-hmm. and then she knew that she was going to die. She was going to kill herself, whether by mm-hmm. poison or by cutting her wrists or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she laid down knowing she was going to die, and she wrapped its hand around her arm. So our first thought was, that sounds like a mother-child kind of situation, you know. And we found it very touching and very heartwarming, the story as it was being told. Yeah. Now, though, through genetic testing that recovered mitochondrial DNA, we know that they, in fact, are not a mother and child.
They're not related.
They are not genetically related. They mm-hmm. may be related some other kind
socially,
of way, but not genetically, right.
What a fascinating human part of this story, though,
right,
I think, to
right.
think about what went on. Right. What kind of a life did this creature live? Humanoid, what kind of relationship was there between this other person, this female, and this?
She could have been a caretaker, she could have been a lover, she could have been a wife.
What were the circumstances of their deaths? Right. It's all very fascinating, the human part of the story.
Exactly.
But we'll never know.
Things that we may very well never know. Exactly that.
But it's interesting to think about anyway. Let's see, is there anything else we haven't covered? Oh, I know what was interesting. You mentioned in the cancellous bone, were these fiber-like.
Right. But this is the other big mystery about the bone of the star-child skull. The one at first we've already talked about is the reddish residue in the cancellous bone. The other is that coming out of some of the cancellous bone is something that we call filaments or fibers. They are these thread-like substances, and we don't know if they are fungi, bacteria, or even some kind of capillary system that's in the bone of this particular skull.
But it related to normal human skulls. We don't find that kind of.
We don't find, no. There's no fiber in that sense in any bone that we have that we're aware of. So these things are brand new, so far as I know, in any of the few scientists that have seen it up to this point. Now, somebody may come along and say, oh, yeah, well, I know what that is. It's, blankety blank blank. Mm-hmm. And then we'll have an answer to that mystery. But right now, the first few experts that we've talked to about it have said, we don't know what it is. We've never seen anything like it. So it's those fibers, and also, too, what's interesting about them is you saw them. They're different kinds. There's not even a consistency about them within
yes.
the matrix of the bone.
Yes.
So there's something either highly, highly unusual about those fibers of those filaments, or they're just some kind of growth that acquired, that came to be over the course of 900 years. But nobody that knows anything about it believes that that's possible, that this is something that was embedded in the matrix of the bone. It didn't grow on it like after the fact. And as you saw from some of the slides, you can just see these filament fiber things come in or go out of the bone, and they seem to fit like snakes or something. So it's pretty weird.
It was strange.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming to the end, and I wanted to make sure that we get your contact information so people can either find out more about it or help to contribute to this whole project and the research that's being done. There's a lot more to this story that I think people should be aware of, and I'd love to talk to you more about it. But as I said, we're limited on time. So why don't you go ahead and give your contact information? Just tell us.
Well, anybody that wants to, find out about it and more about it can go to the Star Child Project website, which is www.starchildproject all one word, starchildproject.com,
Okay.
and they'll be able to read, most of where we are at that point. By the time this show airs, there will be a lot of new information on the site probably. So those who are listening and are interested, go to starchildproject.com, and you'll be able to get the latest that we'll know at that time, which is considerably farther than as we're doing this right now. And all I can tell you is that we hope to continue moving forward and continue making discoveries about these, what are mysteries to me as I sit here now talking to you. But hopefully we'll get some clarity by the time that the show is run, and maybe we can do a follow-up of some kind so you can know what's what at that point.
Sure. Okay, so if people go to your website,
Right.
and they can find out if they choose to contribute to this.
If they want to
where?
contribute, they can very easily send to Cognoscence, COGNOSCENCE, and they can access that at www.cognoscence.org. But anyway, send a check to Cognoscence, 83 Priory Gardens. This is in England. 83 Priory Gardens, PRIORYGAR, Gardens. Highgate, 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 London, England, N65QU. They have a different kind of zip code than we have. They have the letter N and 6 and a couple of spaces, and then 5 and Q and U. So this is the reason for that is I'm living now and working for this outfit Cognoscence in London, and they are managing the money, and they are just managing the whole process now. I just pretty much go where they tell me and do what they want me to do, and it's working out really well. They're taking it very seriously, and they use the money well and wisely, and just as you saw today, we're making tremendous headway now that they have taken it over and are arranging for the funding and the dispersal of the funding.
Well, it's a fascinating subject, and yes, we look forward to learning more about the Star Child skull. Thank you so much, Lloyd Pye, for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me, Catherine. It's been a joy to be here, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Great, thanks. Hello and welcome. My name is Catherine Noble, and I have a fascinating guest with me today who has some fascinating video. Jaime Maussan is a well-known name and figure in Mexico. He was host of a show that was like 60 Minutes. It was 60 Minutes in Mexico. And he's now producing a new program called The Big Mysteries of the Third Millennium. I'd like you to welcome my guest, Jaime Maussan.
Catherine, thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. And you're here to talk about the subject of the video that was shot in Mexico of some anomalous lights and UFO activity in Mexico back in March. But this video came to light in May. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, this is a very important video because it's the first time that the Air Force in Mexico, the military in Mexico, has released an official video. And this is also important because the video was obtained through the FLIR system, which is an infrared system that is used to stop airplanes with drugs from South America and Mexico. There are planes in the south of Mexico that are used to follow and chase planes that can be bringing weapons or drugs to the country. Sometimes they are not able to see the planes because they are camouflaged or they are using the clouds. Then they use this sophisticated system to find them through heat. For that reason, with this camera, they found the objects which were not airplanes that were producing heat but were invisible to the eye. At least 11 objects invisible to the eye.
Now we're going to see a part of this video.
Ellos observan un vuelo de reconocimiento para interceptar aeronaves que ingresan al territorio nacional por droga. Los pilotos sobrevolaron el estado de Campeche. De pronto, el radar de la aeronave C-26A de la Fuerza Aérea Mexicana un blanco.
U.S.-built plane that's also flown by our Air Force and the Army.
Es correcto, ahora está al asiento de nuestra posición.
Like a 7 o'clock position.
Su forma únicamente brillante.
Plus, when the radar operators handle the clear,
que localizar el blanco detectado por el radar.
red,
A las 7, a la misma altura. Hay unas nubes ahí,
they'll capture other objects at their
pero a ver, ¿dónde tenemos que viene atrás de nosotros? Como a las 7, 8 de la función.
yeah, 7 or 8 o'clock position.
Los radares traen una punta delante.
La cámara infrarroja detectó otros
They
objetos
captured
que
other
el
strange
radar
objects
no
flying behind the
aparecieron.
cloud. Oh, there's 8 o'clock. He's counting them.
Y van a una velocidad, pero 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 en la pantalla.
This is I put on my radar screen. Off light, it's in off.
8, 9, 10, 11, contando todas las cosas.
He counts 11 total objects here.
Algún objeto que yo había visto con anterioridad. De acuerdo con los pilotos, los objetos los siguieron por varios minutos.
And these objects were following the airplane. And then they wanted to zoom in and really
Voy a checar por la ventana, tenemos uno que va aproximadamente a la 1.
see this at 1 o'clock position here.
Pues siguen a las 9.
Nunca pude identificarlo
So
visualmente.
we could not identify what it was
El radar
visually.
indicó que los objetos realizaron drásticos cambios de rumbo, que las velocidades podían estar, no sé, de 60 nudos.
He's saying that the velocity of these objects were flying anywhere from 60 to
300 nudos.
300 knots.
Pues jamás se había visto, ¿no? Es decir, los objetos registraron en cuestión de segundos incrementos de velocidad de 180 hasta 540 kilómetros por hora. El material grabado por los pilotos de la Fuerza Aérea Mexicana fue entregado al periodista Jaime
This gentleman here is one of the
Unas fuerzas armadas de un país
never
han
for the first time in
proporcionado
history has the military ever
una evidencia tan
shared
clara
their
y
evidence
contundente como la que estamos viendo en
of
este
something of such
momento.
La
extraordinary.
Secretaría de la Defensa Nacional dio una notificación para lo ocurrido el pasado 5 de marzo. La tripulación del avión C-26A de la Fuerza Aérea Mexicana fue interrogada sobre el avistamiento. No se encontró daño alguno en el equipo que detectó y grabó los 11 objetos. Santos Mondragón, Noticieros Televisa.
La verdad es sorprendente, usted lo ha visto, y es verdad, también es de la primera vez que la Fuerza Aérea Mexicana da conocer un material como este, con estas evidencias de lo que hasta esta noche es o son objetos voladores
With
de
this evidence, it may appear that we have actually UFOs,
por las cámaras
ovnis,
infrarrojas de este
which
avión
is the
militar.
Spanish
Pero una serie
translation.
de revisiones hechas aquí en Noticieros Televisa, cuadro por cuadro, dejan ver que
That's what they did with frame by frame. They went back to the
son
footage.
16. Vamos a ver
We
los
captured
puntos
16
que
objects. So we'll see from here. One.
Viene atrás de nosotros. Como a las 7, 8 de la función. Los radares traen una punta adelante. Un pito adelante.
There's another one.
A ver, ¿qué tenemos?
All right, so what's going on here? And the air control operator is telling the pilot, you capture these objects, 10, 11, 12.
¿Qué fíjate más o menos lo que tenías que ir? Oye, ya le gusta como... Ay, mamá.
There's more, there's more, he's saying.
Sigue más atrás. 10, 11 objetos.
We're following the
16 contados uno a uno.
Yeah, we counted 16 objects.
La verdad no lo sé, hemos buscado opiniones de expertos, no lo saben.
We've asked different advice, different experts what this is.
This kind of technology was available, is available, and though these objects did not appear on radar, they did appear with the infrared technology.
No, they also appear, not all of them, but some of them appear on the radar. Especially the first one, they chased one object they thought was an airplane with drops for 20 or 30 minutes. Then finally they found the object, which now we can see is not an airplane, but they didn't know at that time. They followed that, and then they found 11 more objects which didn't look like a plane, and they appear on formation. They try to look these objects through the windows because they are military making surveillance,
Right.
and they never saw it.
And they could see it on their instruments, but looking out the window, they cannot see anything.
They saw some of them in the radar,
sorry.
and some of them in the FLIR. For that reason, they chased the objects, but suddenly they had to turn because they were very low on fuel.
Oh.
And at that moment, instead of getting away, the objects got closer to the plane and surrounded the plane. At that moment, the pilot felt like he had to turn off the lights, the navigation lights, because he felt that they were in danger.
They felt threatened by these things.
Then you cannot say he imagined this, or they were balloons, or they were oil wells, or they were anything else. I believe this presence is real. I believe they are trying to tell us something. I hope we have an open mind to listen to them. The signs in Europe, Mexico, in England, this Mayan calendar, just 2 weeks ago, a huge UFO was photographed over the pyramids in Monte Alban. Just in March 31st, 2003, we had a message in the volcano Iztaccíhuatl, a message that probably is telling us that something is going to happen. All these events, in a way, are creating an image. And this image, for me, is that they want desperately to communicate with us. We have to open. Probably it's a big danger, and we don't want to listen, and we don't want to see. It's difficult to say, but I believe they are friendly, and they are trying to help the human beings.
So you want us all to keep an open mind, but to study the evidence as well.
Exactly, to be a skeptic.
Be a skeptic.
And at the same time, not just a skeptic, but also have the will to investigate. There are not more than 100 investigators around the world. There are many critics. All the people you see around these events,
Sure.
most of them are critics. Most of the people that you see making lectures, I won't say who or who is not, are critics, not investigators. To be an investigator, you need time,
Yes.
you need patience, because you have to make an effort, and you need money. Otherwise, you cannot do a real investigation. But that's what we need in this phenomenon. We need that the science gets involved with this. We need that the governments put money behind this. We need to really give seriousness to this event that is real and is important.
When you started out as a journalist many years ago, did you expect your career to go this direction?
No, I didn't want to get involved in this.
You didn't want to get involved in this?
No, but the truth is the truth. And my compromise is with the truth.
Now,
And the truth took me to here.
Yeah. Sounds good. But now you're involved in this other program.
The big mysteries.
The Big Mysteries. Okay, so it's not just focused on UFOs, but
No,
other
not just,
other
there are other things. For example, big mysteries of the past, of the pyramids and the knowledge.
We want to get in touch with you.
Yes, I have a site. It's ovnis.tv, www.O-B like Victor, NIS.tv. And you can watch my show Sundays live, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's Jaime Maussan, Jaime, Maussan.tv.
Okay.
And you just need to download real one,
Okay.
and then you will be able to see my show.
To access
And
that.
my email is jaimemaussan@yahoo.com.mx. I repeat, Jaime Maussan with double S, MX @yahoo.com.mx.